welcome to everybody. I'm very happy to be here today presenting the Center for Deliberative Democracy and Global Governance, especially after being here for 3 years, well, in the last 4 years. So today I'm giving an overview of a very recent project that we are undertaking at the University of Zurich and University of Geneva. The project aims to experiment a new format for a Swiss National Citizen Assembly. In this project, other than myself, participate Professor Nina Stojanovic from University of Geneva, Professor Daniel Kübler from University of Zurich, who are both the main investigator. We also have Andrea Ayman, who is our PhD student, Marie Urleman, who is our research assistant. And then we swiftly collaborate with Professor Gerold Schneider, Dr. Johannes Gren, and Dr. Tilja Ellendorf, all from the Department of Computational Linguistics at the University of Zurich. So as you can imagine, I would say this project involves some important technological innovation between the field of deliberative democracy. So let's start the presentation. So before to start, I would like to give a general overview of what happened in Switzerland from the side of democratic innovation. I would say, a little homework and a look at Participedia, all the Swiss cases in democratic innovation. And I have to say, we do not have much, only 10 cases. This obviously is a partial picture of what really happened in Switzerland, but it's also an indication that in Switzerland, we are probably quite a bit behind in relation to the other country of the OECD. So in addition to what Participedia tell, more specifically, we have some important academic experimentation initiative. The main one, well, we say is our project at the University of Zurich, where we experiment, and we will experiment citizen assembly at the local and cantonal level. Then we have the DemoScan project from the University of Geneva, led by Nina Stojanovic, which experiments and analyzes citizen initiative review in Switzerland. We also have to mention the project at University of Bern called Demokratie Fabrik, so Democratic Factory, which is an experiment based on online local governance. So we have also several, I would say, local initiative here. Well, I mentioned a few. We have in Lausanne, in Verdun-Urbain, as well Fribourg, Vevey. And then we have we had a canton initiative in Geneva, Aargau, where we actually collaborate together with the University of Zurich, in Ticino as well, where there is an ongoing project to reform the local governance system. And finally, last year we had the first National Citizen Assembly and food policy. So before to start on the hot topic of today, just give a very quick look on the quality of this democratic experimentation. Here I give an overlook of the experiment we ran at the University of Zurich. So the 3 citizen assembly on climate protection in 3 localities of the canton Zurich. So specifically, we ran 3 citizen assembly in the locality of Uster, Thalwil, and Winterthur, which are cities fairly big in the canton Zurich. So we measured the deliberative reason index. So for who does not know what DRI is, I'm inviting you to read our very recent paper in the American Political Science Review. But DRI is an index that captures, say, reflective collective reasons across a group. How do we interpret the graph? So that is the result from Winterthur, one of our cases, but the other results align very much to this one. So how do we interpret the graph? So more the points are dispersed and far away from the diagonal line, less deliberative reason exists. And so here we have 0.22 deliberative reason, and more the point are, I would say, cluster around the diagonal and focus in one point. In this case, more deliberative reason we have. So in this case, we have, I would say, consistency in agreement. So we have a kind of a preference clarification or preference transformation. So when looking the RI at the core level, we observe that participants with lower level of civic literacy or participants who tend to be self-excluded from the political participation as a voter have much lower DRI level at the beginning of the deliberation process than people who vote more. However, the deliberation wash, I would say, away these differences. This also show that deliberations, say, stimulate collective reason without exclusionary pattern as usually seen in context of voting. The last say observation I would like to mention here is that we observe that who want to participate in the citizen assembly tend to be highly educated. So the graph on the left, this trend is also reflected in voting behavior. So people who usually go to vote tend to be more educated, as in the graph on the right. But also we observe that who want to participate in the assembly, in these three cases, tend to be younger, in contrast to people who want to vote. So yes, the results obviously they are indicative that deliberative process in the on these three example might appeal more the young people or some part of the population that usually does not go to vote. It is still a very indicative result and require more data to be generalized, obviously. However, I would say in the light of this promising outcome, we believe that it is interesting to test a deliberative practice between the Swiss political system. So yet the Swiss political system is characterized by a representative democratic component, by a strong direct democratic component as referendum and popular initiative, but lacks of a deliberative institutional component. And so what we want to really experiment in this project is to check if deliberative component can be inserted between the Swiss context and if we can have maybe an happy outcome between the Swiss system. So how? Well, okay, the Swiss system can be schematized, very schematized, as following. We have a legislative, in which law proposed, legislative works, I would say, as justification chamber, and we have strong proof that justification is very well developed in Switzerland, as already tested by paper by Pedrini, who measured the discourse quality index within our parliament. Usually law are proposed and we have a couple of veto players, but the main one is the referendum power, which can act as a veto power over the proposition. Yet one of the way, say, to see the citizen assembly within the system is seeing it as a chamber, I would say, for discourse, reflection, which inject reason to the parliament, reason decision, and weaken the veto power of the referendum, either because the parliament based the justification over a reason proposition, or because citizen assembly outcomes might act as a broker of knowledge, and so incentivize truth-seeking behavior across the public, as for example, Simon Niemeyer pointed out in one of his articles. So how our citizen assembly will work. So we operate a classic stratified random selection. First, a pure sortition of 20,000 citizens. Then we stratify under participant according to social, political, demographic, linguistic, regional, say, representation of the population. So then we will have two phases. So in phase number one, we will have 5 online monolingual regional citizen assembly. And at the end of the process, the participant of the 5 regional assembly will meet in person in one face-to-face multilingual national citizen assembly. So today, we focus on the real innovative part of the proposition, which is the 5 citizen assembly, which are online, monolingual, will be facilitated by an artificial facilitator, and the participant themselves will discuss and decide the content of the topic to be discussed later in the face-to-face event. So why is this component innovative? Because, well, the participant themselves will decide the topic or what part of the topic to discuss. And we'll say at some extent, they rule the deliberation. So the aim here is to produce a higher level of internal transparency and higher level of popular control of the event. So internal transparency is the extent to which participants are aware of the condition in which they are participating. And popular control refers to how citizens might exert their power at different points of the process. So this phase aims to increase internal transparency and popular control by allowing the participant to select a specific point of an issue that will be discussed during the face-to-face final assembly. The other two innovative features are the development of an artificial facilitator, which we are going to explore in a moment, and the development of an online deliberative platform, which aims to support the artificial facilitator, but also to make it easier for participants with low digital literacy to participate. And also the online platform has the goal to coordinate the overall decision-making process across the 5 assembly. So the effort to develop an artificial facilitator so far has been focused on satisfying, the deliberative principle of reflection, inclusion, mutual respect. So we have several critical perspective on existing artificial facilitator. These critiques are telling us that artificial facilitator are often biased, given pre-existing bias. This is because the developer of artificial facilitator are usually white male who might introduce biased perspective toward, for example, gender or minority, and such bias can be involuntarily perpetrated during the deliberative process. In addition, in the literature, it is also possible to read some critiques that emphasize technical shortcoming of the artificial facilitator, as the lack, of the ability of capability of the artificial facilitator to understand discourses, human feeling, or the bias to propose some decontextualized argumentation. So again, technical bias might be insensitive toward a different type of disadvantages, such as difference in learning ability, differences or different argumentation style, or different language style. Yet, so far, artificial facilitator usually focus on more on mutual respect, inclusion, by tackling a specific point as monitoring whether participants are respecting all their consideration or whether everybody participates. So far, artificial facilitator does not look too much to the idea of reflection, or whether all the participants integrates different perspective due to this, because there is a technical shortcoming, obviously. So obviously, mutual respect, inclusion are all important aspects that we will account for our model, but we also consider reflection, considering, for example, new technological tools such as ChatGPT. However, our intention is to enhance also other features of the classic understanding of artificial facilitator by exploiting some specific technical potential that exists, that the existing technology already offers. So how can we conceptualize a new type of artificial facilitator? By and large, we are developing our artificial facilitator considering two specific axes. The first is, an improved understanding of artificial facilitator, considering the deliberative task of guaranteeing mutual respect, reflection, inclusion, this during the deliberative process. Why is that, an improved understanding of the existing task? Because we do not look at inclusion and reflection only from, a descriptive level of the number of participants or whether everybody participates within the same exact time. but also considering, at least this is the idea, considering the discursive representation approach by accounting for discursive inclusion or discursive reflection, or we would like that the artificial facilitator guarantee that every discourse is equally accounted for and are equally, I would say, included during the deliberative process. So the second axis is relates to the question of deliberative integrity, we say. So who and how to guarantee that the process is independent, neutral, qualitatively up to standard, say not ideologically driven, non-manipulative, and so forth. So integrity has been defined as the fidelity to the basic of deliberative democracy. This means that fidelity of procedural value that deliberative democracy should embody expressed over the mini public. So a central point, I would say, a central point of integrity is, I would say, put the idea of quality of the standard deliberative practices, which involve the issues of autonomy of mini public from partisan agenda, but also the question of discursive inclusion and reflection. So how discourses are balanced. So our approach to the artificial facilitator is not to consider it as a democratic engagement process, but rather as a tool that enhances our power to undertake deliberative processes. So I'm not going into the technical aspect of what we will do. However, I would still like to give you an overview on how artificial facilitator will work, considering reflection, inclusion, mutual respect. So reflection, we aim to stimulate reflection by asking the artificial facilitator to instantly understand the content of each participant's speech, stimulate the responses of other participants based on the discourses that has already been raised. Inclusion will be satisfied by checking participant activity, but also checking on discourse plurality, or that whether discourses are equally represented during the debate. So mutual respect will be undertaken by checking on the participant sentiment. So, say more technically, this can be done by speech-to-text, natural language understanding, or exploiting existing technologies such as ChatGPT, which will contribute to facilitate the task of understanding, say, the content of discourses. Inclusion can be achieved considering speech, time monitoring, checking for silent participants, and mapping and monitoring discourse diversity to guarantee discourse inclusion. So ask people with different views to participate more, for example. So mutual respect can finally be checked through sentiment analysis, monitoring voice tone, for example, and techniques such as this. So yet we still do not have a prototype, but most of the issues that other artificial facilitator encounter were determined by technical issues. However, now we have a new technology that can help us to on this task, the ChatGPT, which will be our underlying language model. Yet the ChatGPT, I would say, is subject to technical or pre-existing bias. It is difficult to answer here, but here I would like to show some heuristic examples which do not follow a very scientific rigor, I would say. It's more actually a ludic example. But anyway, here I ask, I try to test ChatGPT. I ask whether it can extract discourses from, I would say, a concourse of sentences that on climate change that have been found in the public sphere, and ChatGPT instantly identifies 6 possible discourses, and I have to admit that what it identifies fairly reflecting what I originally thought of the concourse of sentences. I also test, I would say, possible source of technical bias as potential incapability of GPT to understand slang or dialect expression, which usually, at least in the Italian speaking part of Switzerland, is used by elderly participants. Here I asked ChatGPT a question by using my dialect from the South Ticino, which is usually used by a very narrow number of people. Also in this case, ChatGPT seems to understand my dialect. So in relation to the pre-existing bias, I have to admit that it was not an easy task, but I finally found a formulation that uncovered the dark side of ChatGPT. Instead of directly asking for an opinion, I asked to rank, for example, here some organization, considering how dangerous they are. So 10 most dangerous and 1 least dangerous. So it is not a proper scientific test, but it gives you an idea on how GPT might work. So we have a very interesting result. Pegida is ranked as extremely dangerous. So it is ranked as well Black Lives Matter. But also it's particularly interesting that the Australian Aboriginal legal rights movement, which is essentially pro bono legal service for Aboriginal and Strait Island people, is considered as very dangerous, or at least above the threshold of dangerous. Yet I asked separately if it knows what is Aboriginal legal right movement. The GPT seems to correctly source what the movement is. So I'm not sure what to add, except for the fact that it has been very difficult for me to trick GPT into this evil game. However, in our model, we try our best to avoid possible pre-existing bias. So let's now focus on the question of deliberative integrity or fidelity to the basis of deliberative democracy. In this respect, the artificial facilitator can play 3 roles. The first, the one we already discussed, so guaranteeing the process of the 3 principles of inclusion, respect, and reflection. And we say a second role is to check and generate a report which define whether the mutual respect was satisfied, to check whether the process was not dominated by specific discourse. So if discourse of say plurality was guaranteed, whether during the process discourses were integrated in the participant consideration. For example, based on the metadata, it would be possible to assess how the participant for a specific region, age, political affiliation interact, whether they all express their point in respect to way and so forth. Then task ask to the rate and say evaluative assessor plus representative of course exposed during deliberation. This might constitute the basis for DRI analysis. Then we would like to ask to can we guarantee that the deliberative process is qualitatively up to standard, not ideologically driven or manipulative. So I'm nearly finished. So in future, beyond the specific focus of our project, the artificial facilitator can really play a major role in the deliberative process by, for example, improving discourses inclusion and reflection, by integrating omitted discourses that are not represented by participants, but are actually existing in the public sphere. So in future, the artificial facilitator might play in the devil's advocate, pre-mining and mapping the discourses between the public sphere and check whether they are equally included into the deliberative process. And if not, ask it to include them. It also might be able to monitor listening, considering nonverbal communication, for example. On the other side, there is the question of integrity. It might play a major role in monitoring the information plurality and neutrality of the expert that are invited to the deliberative process, or give, we say, real-time feedback to human in order to assist human facilitator in assessing face-to-face deliberative process. As already mentioned, artificial facilitator becomes a technical solution to enhance deliberation rather than, we say, a democratic engagement process. Yeah, thanks for listening. I'm finishing here with this poem I asked GPT to write and asking to relate artificial facilitator and mini public. Thank you again for your attention.